Welcome. This episode of Chat with the Brewer Live and filmed in front of a live studio audience. That's all right. I like that. Actually, my name is Seth. You guys have probably seen this episode before watching on YouTube and around the world. We have a very special edition. This is usually a Monday night show, but it is Friday night. It's a good night to drink beer, hang out, and actually expand our horizons a little. This is outside of the norm for the Chat with the Brewer. We've got a very special guest tonight. Dr. Sam Holloway is all the way from the Pacific Northwest, has flown in. He's going to share with us a couple things from his series called Crafting a Strategy. I had the chance to talk to Dr. Holloway on the way up and the drive up. Just a wealth of information about new breweries, about things that are going on in the industry, things that can cost breweries money, things that can make breweries monies, the pitfalls, the gotchas, and the victory points for small craft breweries. So for those of you watching online, I'm going to man the computer. There's a Q&A button in the top right. I think it's up in this section over here. There's a Q&A button. Click on that. Throw us your questions. We're going to do questions later. Everybody else that's in the audience, they get to enjoy beer, so I hope at home you guys have got a beer at least. Everybody else in the audience, we get to the end of the show, or when Sam has kind of given us a quick introduction of what he's got going on, we will ask live questions as well. It's going to be town hall style, so don't be afraid to raise your hand and pick his brain. We've got a little while with him. So I guess you guys don't want to listen to me. That's not why you're here. So without further ado, let's give a warm wooden legs welcome to Dr. Sam.
Thank you, Seth. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on a Friday night. I hope this was an excuse for you to tell your boss you had to leave work a little early to go do some learning and have a good time. So I hope that's the case. It's wonderful to be here. I'll just start with a little bit of background about me. I have the best job in the world. I'm a college professor, which means after I do a little bit of teaching, I spend my time thinking about whatever I want. And many years ago, it was about 2006, I ended up playing on a City League soccer team, men's City League soccer team. I was the worst player, so I didn't get on the field very much, and the second worst player on the team started a brewery. And we became fast friends because, again, we were not playing soccer. And we would just share ideas and brainstorm. And his name's Jeff Althouse. He's the founder of Oakshire Brewing in Eugene, Oregon, and a great friend, mentor. And really what I learned from hanging out with Jeff and helping him with his brewery, and since then as a professor, I get to travel all over the world. And a lot of people say, you give advice to breweries, and actually I don't. My relationship with brewers is a listening relationship. In some way, I learn because it's exciting to talk to these people. I learn what their problems are, what their challenges are. In some ways, they almost think of me like their therapist. I ask questions and get them to verbalize things in ways that maybe other people can't, just because, again, I'm kind of a super nerd, and I get to think about this stuff all the time. And over time, I've been able to learn a few things, and hopefully tonight with the studio audience and the folks that are on the internet, I can share with you a few of the things that I've picked up. And the goal is really to get your brain thinking. I was chatting with a gentleman here who's thinking about opening a brewery nearby. Our goal at craftingastrategy.com is for the conversations about business ideas in the craft beer industry to be as good as they currently are about making beer. And if we can do that, we're all winners, and the industry is going to be a winner. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about two things today: how to make money making beer and how to make a profitable cheeseburger. With those two things in mind, I think we can start a conversation and hopefully generate some great questions from the audience and from the people online. So here we go. There's a really smart guy from Harvard named Michael Porter. Those of you, the Porter's 5 Forces, that you studied business, Porter basically said any business that's out there has 5 or 6 fundamental things that they need to do. They need to get this. You need to get the hops and the malted barley and the water to the factory. You need to add in the wisdom and creativity of the brewer. You need to make the beer. That's that second level there of operations. Outbound logistics in the craft beer world, that's either self-distribution or hiring a distributor. And then you've got your aftermarket sales and your retail presence. And so what I did was I took Porter's idea and I said, how can I make this about beer? And that's really what our next slide is, which is what I've done is taken a $4 pint at retail and broken out the money on each step. And so this is called Porter's value chain. So the idea is there's a system of money in every pint of beer. Those of you that are drinking, some of you have already drank about 25 cents of your beer. Some of you are already a couple bucks in. That's fantastic. Go get another one. The beer's fantastic here, by the way. Seth, you and your crew do a wonderful job. And so what Porter's value chain allows us to do is start to articulate the entrepreneurial opportunities. I work with undergrads a lot, and They come to my office, they're like, dude, I want to work in the beer industry. Can you help me? And I say, well, do you want to make beer? They're like, well, don't I have to? And the truth is, no. You know, you can be a distributor. In Portland, Oregon, there's so many small brew pubs. We have a thriving mobile bottling business. That's working in the craft beer industry. And the mobile bottling, if you look at the chart over there, really about 10 cents of every $4 pint is a packaging cost. And so if you're a startup brewery and maybe you don't have enough money to buy your own bottling line, it's going to be cheaper for you, actually, instead of taking on a lot of debt and paying a lot of interest on a loan that you may not even qualify for because you're just getting started. It's going to be better for you to go to a mobile bottler, give them a good price, give them about 10 cents out of every pint, but then they're packaging it for you, and now you've got a little label on the side of this wonderful package that keeps your beer fresh that people can take home with them. You know, so it's not just serving it over the counter in growlers now. You can get into stores and scale in some of the more traditional ways. And so what I want you to do is just think about, there's a system of money, and so that second layer, the 53 cents, if you're in a traditional production brewery, that's kind of the standard three-tiered system where you make beer and you sell all of your beer to a distributor, you only have 53 cents of that $4 under your control. And of that 53 cents, about 23 cents is profit after you cover your costs. And so as we look at the value chain and as you start to think entrepreneurially about your business model, you say to yourself, well, okay, 23 cents is pretty good. Is there a way that I could capture more profit in every pint? And that's when you get into a discussion of self-distribution, which I understand is being discussed here in South Dakota. It's legal in many other states. And so if we look at the traditional 23 cent per pint, you're going to make beer and you're going to sell that keg for about 103 bucks. Now if you collapse the value chain and get into the self-distribution business model, now instead of only controlling 53 cents, you're controlling about 94 cents of the value chain, and you just grab the distributor margin. So now instead of making 23 cents, you're making 53 cents a pint. And just to put that into perspective, for every 5 cents that you grab extra by innovating in your business model, for every nickel that you grab, if you're making 1,000 barrels a year, which is a lot, but it's easy math this way, if you grab an extra nickel for every 1,000 barrels you make a year, that's 12,000 in profit in your pocket. Now imagine if you can grab 6 nickels. Okay, the numbers really start adding up, and now as a small brewery that maybe doesn't qualify for a bank loan from your local community bank yet, you can fund your growth through cash flow by being a little bit innovative in your business model. And so this is how the system of money really starts to work for you as a craft brewery startup. So at the self-distribution model, now that keg, same cost of goods sold, same labor, etc., you're selling it for about $145 instead of $103. And I'm not saying this is the only way that you can sell beer. Sometimes the advantages of self-distribution close by, the push in making money through self-distribution, in my experience, is about 50 miles. Above 50 miles, a professional distributor is going to do a better job for you. They might even do a better job for you close to home. You know, I'm not here to suggest that distributors aren't good. In fact, they're fantastic resources for craft brewers to get their beer not into just distant markets, but into close markets. They have marketing resources and experience that a lot of us don't have. And so having a strong distributor relationship is crucial to any brewery. And so maybe 10% of your business can be through self-distribution, so you can actually go meet the retailers, tell your story, teach them how to talk about your beer when they meet a consumer, and then the distributor can distribute the rest of yours. So let's look at what happens now if we go to the brew pub or tasting room business model like we have here at Wooden Legs. Let's see how the profits change. I like that number. $3.70 of the value chain are now under your control. So now instead of making 23 cents a pint or 50 through traditional distribution or 53 cents a pint through self-distribution, now you're making $1.36. Look at all the nickels we just grabbed. Think about the jobs you can create. Think about the good wages you can pay to people in your community. Think about how fulfilling it would be to base your life on creating great beer, but also having enough money left over at the end of the month to live the way that you dreamed of and to put your kids through college. That's really what a brew pub and this kind of business model innovation allows people to do. And so this is my other favorite number. I like selling kegs for $500 in retail. It really is a good way to pay back your aunt that loaned you money to get started. It's a good way to put money in the bank, and it's a good way to think about maybe getting a bigger brew house and expanding. So the tasting room business model, tasting room is lingo for you don't have a kitchen, you just sell straight over the counter. Some states require that you have a kitchen. In Oregon, If you don't have a kitchen, you can have food carts. So at our brewery, Jeff Althouse and I, at Oakshire Brewing, we just have different food carts pull up into our parking lot, and they serve burritos one night, pizza another night. We get to keep all of our business about making beer. We don't know how to run a restaurant very well. I'll show you. I've learned a lot from a chef friend of mine lately. But Jeff and I, when we started, we were terrified of opening a restaurant. And when I say we, I really mean him. He's the genius. I'm just the kind of the mouthpiece in that relationship. So let me show you how this lays out in terms of you don't have to do only one business model. You can mix them. You can have traditional distribution and get the benefits of having a professional distributor. You can have self-distribution so that you get close to your retail customers and you can talk to bar owners and help share your story that way. And you can combine it with even a small amount of tasting room sales, but it really does flip the revenue model for you in a really interesting way. So after I go over this, I'm going to switch over to how to make a profitable cheeseburger, and then we'll open it up for questions. Seth, does that sound good? Okay. So this is a traditional brewery. At the white area is 23 cents profit per pint. So this is a brewery that's mostly a traditional production brewery. They make a little bit of money through self-distribution. That's the yellow area. And then the green area is dock and tasting room sales, where they're essentially they're their own distributor and their own retailer. So let's look at what this does. If we add up what I call a composite margin, or the average profitability per pint, by just having a little bit of business model innovation like this graph shows, what you end up with is, instead of playing by the old rules of the three-tiered system and only making 23 cents a pint, you're making 53 cents every time you sell a beer. And remember, every nickel you grab really starts to add up. So I would encourage everybody to think as creatively about your business model as you do about the great beer that you make, and your financial dreams will come true, along with all the other great things brew pubs do, like community, bringing people together, and allowing people to have jobs where their creativity can flourish. Last piece of the puzzle, and this is only one slide. This is profitable food, and I have to give credit to my business partner, Dr. Mark Meckler. Mark was a chef at Haymarket Restaurant in San Francisco. He's run a resort in Aruba with 400 seats. And he realized when he was a chef, he actually didn't know how to make money making food. He just knew how to make really good food. And he had a boss one time come up to him and say, "Why are we losing money at the end of the month?" And he said, "I don't know. People love the food. That's a you problem." But Mark quickly realized it was a him problem. And so he ended up quitting a successful career as a chef and going back to Michigan State to get an MBA in food and beverage or hospitality management. And it was there that Mark really learned how to make money making food. And that's really why he and I make such great compliments on our website. I'm the beer guy, he's the food guy, and he's taught me now how to make profits on the food side too, and I'll share with you an example about a profitable cheeseburger. I apologize for all the numbers on here, but let me kind of walk you through. First of all, these numbers are quarterly sales. Very few of us are going to have 45,000 guests in a day. Maybe the Cheesecake Factory nationally, but for most of us. So this is a thriving brew pub, a large one in a city like Portland, Oregon, maybe like Hopworks, which is a wonderful brew pub that makes beer in Portland, Oregon. Hopworks does over 10,000 barrels of beer a year, a lot of it through their pubs. So these numbers are big numbers for a large brew pub. But the basic thing that Mark taught me how to do was, all of us start businesses to make a living. And so if you don't build profits into your pricing, you're doing yourself a disservice. Profits aren't a dirty word. What profits allow us to do is raise wages, reinvest in the business, and kind of live the livelihood that we want. So Mark always says, and our mantra at craftingastrategy.com is, always start with the profits and build from there, because you got into business to make money. So if you look at the top of the white box there, all NFC, that's all your non-food costs. That's your rent, your overhead, all of the things that are required to have a wonderful place here like Wooden Legs. And then how much money you want to make. You get into business for a reason. How much money do you want to make in a quarter? So in this example, we said all of our non-food costs are about $265,000 per quarter. We want to make $36,000. After we pay all the wages and pay our bank back for lending us money to buy the equipment, we think we want to walk away with about $36,000, about $12,000 a month. That's good living. And we think in a big, busy brew pub with lots of tables, we can sell about 45,000 cheeseburgers in this area. And so that gives us an average contribution margin per cheeseburger sale of $6.69. So that's the first piece of information that I encourage everybody watching to calculate. Figure out how to make your food profitable, because those of us that have worked in the restaurant business, as Mark has told me, sometimes we have a loss leader. But the worst thing to happen is that everybody orders your loss leader, and you don't have any money left over at the end of the month. So that's kind of the innovative part that Mark came up with. He said, okay, in order to price your cheeseburger, find out what everybody else is charging. In this example, the average price you can get for a cheeseburger is $8.95. And now that we've calculated a profitable contribution margin of our non-food costs and profit and got the $6.69, that leaves us $2.26 left over that we can tell our cook or our chef, you got to make a cheeseburger for that. And what's wonderful is by putting a constraint on your creative staff, whether it's your brewmaster or whether it's your chef, that generally yields more creativity than saying make whatever you want. And so let me tell you how this usually plays out in kitchens in Mark's experience. So the idea is you go to your chef, you say you have $2.26 to make this profitable cheeseburger. And the chef says, well, that's impossible. I make a half-pound cheeseburger and it's $3 for a half-pound of the sirloin that I like to use. Then you as the business owner say, that's great. Looks like you're going to make a quarter-pound cheeseburger now. So we've already knocked it down to $1.50. And so you say, okay, for the rest of your cheeseburger, you have about 76 cents. How am I going to be able to do that? Doesn't matter. Go for it. Come back in 2 days. Give me a profitable cheeseburger. And so the chef goes away. They work on it. They come back. They bring you this delicious cheeseburger. They hand it to you, and usually with a little bit of contempt in their voice, hey, business guy, taste that, right? And so you do, and it's delicious. And you start saying, how much does it cost? And they say, guess. Right? And you say, I don't know, $2.25. That's a $2.18 burger. How'd you do it? Well, I don't use imported cheese anymore. The stuff in Wisconsin's great. I ended up buying buns from a place down the street. They're really fantastic. The fried egg that I used to love to put on it, I realized that if I didn't use that, but I used some other ingredients that were cheaper and more readily available, it actually tasted better. I put breadcrumbs into the burger itself because you wouldn't let me use a half-pound burger, and guess what? They actually make it taste different, and I like it better. And so you've now infused, through constraints and profitability concerns, creativity into your cook, and every time somebody buys that cheeseburger, you're going to be making money, and you can focus on the beer that probably got you into this industry, because most of us know how to make money on the beer side. That's my very fast, profitable beer, profitable cheeseburger discussion. We've got on the website, of course, brewers from 3 different continents contributing ideas in our forums. We've also got over 10 hours of video tutorials about different angles of marketing, etc. So I can answer any question along the whole spectrum of how to make money in the beer industry, and I'd love to open it up to questions right now.
Thank you very much. That's actually really, really interesting. I think this may be the first type of discussion we've had on this type of the I-29 corridor. I know some of the university does profitability and cost margins on food, and I know when I've talked to the other brewers, we talked hop price and malt price and everything else. It's probably the first time we've heard about it like cohesively all together. There is no bad question right now, guys. So we've got Sam here for a while. I would love to field any questions, and maybe just to start it off, you've had a couple days experience here in South Dakota, and you've been on campus and here in Sioux Falls. Are there things that you've noticed in this area that are accepting of the craft brew? The craft brew industry? Are there things that you've even noticed in your short time that we may struggle with? Like, what just general impressions do you have of the area here and where we're going with craft beer in South Dakota?
Well, first of all, for the folks on the internet, visit Brookings. This place is awesome. The people are great. Try Seth's beer. It's fantastic. I think what I've noticed the most, and this is the fun part for me, is I always go to a new place and I wonder, is the stuff that I've learned in other places going to work here? Is our consumer buying habits the same? Is access to the inputs that we need the same, or is it different? I've talked to Seth a little bit about that. But here's what I've noticed in just going around Brookings with some great people like Craig Silvernagel, who's been my host here from SDSU. People want local. In an era when we can get information through the internet from places on the earth we may never visit, our buying habits are the inverse. They're the opposite. You want to know who's making your beer. You want to know the brewmaster. You want to be able to come sit down and talk to Seth and just ask him what's going on. So the buying habits and the way that the community is here in Brookings, and I'm sure in all over South Dakota, it's the fact that it's not local is better, sort of in a territorial way. It's like, I want to know what I'm buying. I want to know who's making this. I want to know that every time I come to Wooden Legs and put down a beer, that great server that I gave an extra tip to last night, this is going to help him too. You know, there's just this wonderful community feel that pubs have, almost kind of like what church used to have in many communities. People come to pubs to celebrate and congregate. You know, beer in some ways is almost like the sacrament, and it's a way that it brings people together in ways that not a lot of other businesses do. And the other thing that I think is really important, Seth, is brew pubs and distilleries and local wineries, they keep the money and jobs local. They're generally started with local money. They're generally built by local people. If a brew pub's wildly successful, it's not like the shareholders of some publicly traded company that'll never visit the town benefit. It's that the benefit stays here. And that's why I love brew pubs. They are engines of civic and economic wealth. It's really, and I mean, look who's here tonight on a Friday night. Leave work a little early, come to this wonderful pub. It doesn't get any better than this. So thanks everybody for coming in. Good question.
I'll open the floor up. I know we've got some breweries that have just started, some breweries that have been brewing for a while, some breweries that are almost ready to. I'm going to call you guys out here if you don't ask questions. You know about that, right? So we've got some breweries here that are almost signing on a lease. I mean, I'll ask a question to the audience here. What oppositions have you guys ran into? Like, what has been a hurdle? What has been something that you've struggled in either Laverne or in Sioux Falls or in Watertown? And for the sake of the people on the internet, since I won't be swinging the camera around, introduce yourself and the brewery you're from.
Yeah, I'm Richard Draughty, and I'm from Bank Brewing Company in Hendricks, Minnesota. Since you were talking about price, that is one thing that obviously everyone's going to struggle with out of the gate. What can we charge? How do we move beer with the price that we need to get? What would you say is an acceptable price range for a half barrel of IPA that you've seen from?
Are you selling to a distributor, or are you selling it over the counter?
Yep, distributor.
You know, just in general terms, in a market like Portland, Oregon, the range is generally from about $100 to $110 for kind of something that you make all the time. You know, your standard IPA. For something special, you know, that'd be a half barrel price. For something special or exclusive, maybe it's a little bit more. But you know, for my example here of $103, that's based on kind of an average in a pretty well developed market like the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, and then just to follow up, what's the highest price half barrel you've seen to a distributor?
Wow. I don't know, actually. I wish I did. You know, in terms of the pint price, you know, a lot of breweries like mine, Oakshire Brewing, in a couple of weeks we're going to have what we call as our Hellshire Day. And so it's bourbon barrel-aged beer, and we have barrel-aged beers from all over the country brought into our little brewery in Eugene, Oregon. And we sell Hellshire for $15 per 22-ounce bottle, and I think it's an incredible price for the value that we get, or that the consumer gets, and we have no trouble selling out of it in a very short amount of time. So, I guess the message is, almost everybody makes great beer, so you got to compete in other ways. You got to have a great story, right? You've got to be consistent. You've got to make sure your beer is fresh. You've got to make investments in all these other pieces of the supply chain to get your beer so that the first time a consumer tastes it, it tastes right. It's never going to taste as great as it does at a place like Wooden Legs when you're drinking at the source. But if you can put in some of these safeguards for quality, manage your inventory, work with your distributor to make sure that stuff's not sitting in their inventory too long so that your beer is fresh, all of those things go into being able to charge a price. In Portland, Oregon, $4 a pint is actually pretty cheap. The $5 and $6 pint price is kind of normal in that city, and I realize it's a kind of a mecca for craft beer, and maybe the buyers there, consumers there, are a little bit less sensitive to price. But honestly, the opportunity to sit and be surrounded by other people in a pub drinking beer, pricing seems to keep going up, and volumes seem to be increasing too. So that'd be my answer.
That probably goes to a really good question. At the pub here, we have the opportunity to show value. You know, people get to come in and meet our pub keeps and hang out, and we get to discuss the beers. But you obviously remove yourself from that once you go through the distribution model. If people here are looking to do a distribution model or distributing breweries, how can they continue that message? How can they deliver that message of value if they're not talking to every single customer? I mean, I'm sure Rich would love to talk to every single customer that drinks a Bank beer. But how can you perpetuate that? The question comes from is that South Dakota is in its infancy of craft beer,
yeah,
and craft beer is still pretty unknown. I mean, it's probably been well defined in the last even 5 to 10 years. But how do you continue to promote your message through the distribution channels?
I think one of the things that you should all ask Seth for help on is the use of media. I mean, he's got some amazing skills, social media, etc. really what you have to have, you have to be authentic. You can't lie or exaggerate, and be truthful. I think people in the craft beer industry have a very sensitive BS meter. They can tell pretty quickly that you're faking it. And honestly, there's so many good choices out there, it's not worth faking it. So what is unique about you? What story do you have? Maybe your brewmaster has this incredible experience. And so it comes down to, you need to make it, it's your job as the craft business owner to make it easy for the distributor and the bar owner to tell your story for you. That means keep it short, keep it simple, keep it authentic, and continuously remind them. Invite them to the pub. If you grow a little bit and you have a lot of distribution, it probably makes sense to invest in an on-the-ground salesperson in that next major market. Get that person around, checking on the distributor, helping the distributor with their sales, with their setups, with their tastings. These are the investments you need to make when you start going through the distribution model, and they can really pay off really well. So it's have a good story, tell it consistently, use the right words, be authentic, and hustle. Work really hard, and you can have a very beneficial distributor relationship and get your story out there.
I think we're going to pass the mic again. I'll have you introduce yourself in your brewery and maybe where you're at in your process, because there's probably a number of people in the room that don't know that.
Sure. My name's Todd Mack. I'm from Watertown, South Dakota. We're starting a 5-barrel brew house, Watertown Brewing Company in Watertown, South Dakota. The questions I have are, we're at our stage where we've purchased a building. We've ordered our brew house. We expect it the end of May is what we're looking at. We're trying to finish everything else before the brew house shows up, so we can hit the ground running hopefully. But you know, we're right in the thick of it right now, revamping everything, and we're in a fortunate situation because our main investor is also a partner, and so we own the building that we're in, and he's just really gung-ho about really helping us. Chris Borns here is my partner, and so we know beer, and you know, we're home brewers that had the dream of starting a brewery. We really are trying to just the beer is okay. We're not real worried about the beer, although the beer is very important. The business is what we're concerned about. And so I guess the question I have is two somewhat unrelated questions. One, as Richard talks about here, what to charge is really a big deal. Mm-hmm. You know, craft beer is in its infancy stages, as Seth mentions here, but something that we found out through social media is there's more interest than we thought. You know, we launched our Facebook page being so far out from opening just to see what the interest would be, and you know, we've had an overwhelming interest just from people talking to us. So my question is, do we start at that $4 a pint, you know, mark, and hope that people go for it, or what are the pitfalls of starting maybe lower to try to get people in and interested, and then how I don't know how frustrated you make them if all of a sudden you get a good following, then you raise your pint price, you know, $1. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to draw people without making them mad down the road. You know, you talk about the lost leaders or whatever, you know, and so that's where I'm really curious. That's my first part question. My second part question, this isn't a plug, but for people like us that are just starting out, looking for resources of how to do business, I know that you have a subscription service. How could we utilize that service to help, you know, brew geeks like us that really know maybe beer but don't know business?
So I guess first of all, on pricing, don't undersell the value that you add to the beer. You as people, the location that you have, the facility that you have, all of those things add value to the experience of consuming that beer. And it's easy as an entrepreneur to worry a little bit about pricing, and maybe I ought to start low and then work my way up, but don't sell yourself short. The process that I like to go through, so if you got a local library or university near you, go look up Rita McGrath's article. It's called Discovery Driven Planning. And so Discovery Driven Planning, it's a Harvard Business Review article from 1996, and basically what she says is start your business with a reverse income statement. Don't start with willingness to pay and work your way down to costs. Start with costs, then profits, and then work your way up to what you need to charge to make the business work the way that you want. And for the people that are online, the people in the room, on our website, craftingastrategy.com, we have a podcast page where Dr. Mark Meckler and I talk to each other about some of these things. There's a great podcast, about 25 minutes, where he and I talk about discovery-driven planning. That's free. Anybody can access it anywhere in the world. But also on that podcast page are interviews between me and experts in Europe in distillery, branding, and finance, people all across the world that are starting to come together to help each other out. And I guess this sort of answers your second question. When we built craftingastrategy.com, our goal, I was traveling around the world, offering consulting and things like that, and I was making a little bit of money, but I found out that about 85% of the breweries in the market couldn't afford regular consulting help. And those were the breweries that I wanted to help. Those were the breweries that I think really transform communities. And so when Mark and I got together, we said, how can we design a system where people can get the information they want, interact with the people they want at a price they can afford? And that's really why, for less than it costs for 2 hours of asking me questions in a consulting relationship, Mark and I will give you a 1-year subscription to our website that has all of our content. It's basically like an MBA full of content, full of experts, not just us, from all over the world, because they all believe in the industry too. And so I would say we're trying to grow our community. The more people that use it, the more valuable it gets, and the cheaper that price gets too.
I think we're going to go to the cloud here. Is that what's one of the questions online is what do you see the beer trends in the next few years between sours and oak and everything else? Coming from South Dakota, and this is my own interjection on an online question. Coming from South Dakota, we get a lot of influences from both West Coast and East Coast and no coast, so we don't have a real strong path that we have to follow. I guess we're interested to know what do you see as the beer trends in the next couple of years?
Well, if you listen to the Brewers Association, they're talking about 20% market share by 2020. And so that'll take us from about 3,300, 3,400 craft breweries domestically right now to over 10,000 in just a few years. So that would be about a 20% market share. So there's still great growth, especially for local brew pubs and tasting rooms. It certainly is going to get a little bit tighter in the distribution game when you're trying to get into grocery stores, maybe trying to grow into a regional craft brewery, 15,000 barrels or above. But for startups and for people that are wanting to build a local neighborhood brewery, I think there's still a lot of room. Now, in terms of the styles, I'll just give you an example of a place like Portland, Oregon that's pretty crowded. There's I think 68 breweries in Portland, Oregon right now, more than any city in the world. Less than 1 million people, 68 breweries. When I started with that value chain slide, my first question was, how is this possible? How can my city that I love, with not very many people, support 68 breweries? And what I found was, well, if you're selling over the counter at $1.36 per pint profit, it works. And so in terms of styles and things like that, in Portland, almost everybody makes an IPA. And guess what? They're all great. All of them. And so your strategy might be, there's a great startup in Portland called the Commons Brewery, and they make Belgian-style beers, and they don't make an IPA. They purposefully, their founder purposely said, why would I go into a market and make an IPA when I think I can introduce all these other styles? So certainly a niche strategy with your styles can work wonderfully. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that like kind of the traditional ales, an amber ale, an IPA, maybe a session beer, maybe a stout. So I think there's plenty of room, Seth, for growth in all areas because so many consumers now are willing to pay more. They're willing to pay $4, $5, $6 a pint if they know who made it and they can make that emotional connection and feel good about it.
We'll go to one more question here online. There was concern about consolidation. What do you see consolidation in the next few years or in the next 10 years for craft breweries?
That is the big question. With the recent acquisitions by AB InBev, Blue Point Brewing, 10 Barrel Brewing in Oregon, and then just recently Elysian Brewing in Seattle, Washington. There's a lot of questions about that. First, let me just comment on AB InBev. I think the fear that a lot of craft breweries have is, oh my gosh, they're going to buy up these breweries and then slash prices. And then we're going to be really stuck. If our business model is built around $4 a pint and they can get a great beer at less, what's that going to do to us? But I'll tell you what, that's not their strategy. At least that's not their behavior. They bought Goose Island in 2011, made investments in their barrel aging program. I believe Goose Island has the largest barrel aging program in the country now. They haven't messed with them. They're making great beer. They've allowed more people to enjoy that beer. So, I'm not necessarily concerned about downward pricing pressure through consolidation. I think what we're going to have to see is, the real question is, what are consumers going to do? If AB is going to kind of buy these breweries, leave them alone, let them go, that's great. In fact, it's great for those companies because they'll get an infusion of cash and they'll get the expertise. Let's face it, the brewers at those companies are fantastic brewers. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're looking to kind of, I guess, maybe not necessarily learn from on the brewing side, but here's my hypothesis about why Anheuser-Busch is buying up these companies. It used to be in an acquisition transaction you would buy the brand and the production facility, but not the pub. Well, in the last two transactions, and I think in Blue Point too, they bought the pubs too. That's a big signal to me in terms of they want to get closer to the consumer because they see the magic of what happens in a pub like this. And if you're a big international corporation, maybe you don't understand the nuance of what's going on at the point of sale. And so the fact that they bought all of Elysian's pubs and all of 10 Barrels pubs tells me they're making a pretty strategic move here to really understand consumer behavior and how buying habits are changing. One more piece on consolidation, and we'll go to the next question. I think I am excited about the next 12 to 18 months to see if consolidation accelerates or not. But in terms of the local neighborhood brew pub, I don't think consolidation and new entrants into the market, that 20% by 2020, they're not. They're almost mutually exclusive at this point. You know, sure, if you're a big regional brewery like Deschutes in Oregon, or you're selling beer in multiple states, consolidation is an issue for you. It's something you need to think about, and it's something you can read about in lots of different places. But if you're a small brew pub in South Dakota and you're just trying to get started, and you're just trying to help your community out, worry about it later. Focus on the beer. Focus on getting your business model right. I think you're going to be okay.
Yeah, Sam, I have a question from my home brewing daughter and son-in-law down in Omaha who are watching live here. Two questions. One is, do you see an average time to profit for the breweries that start up? And the second question is, what are the biggest mistakes people make starting out a brewery?
I think the biggest mistake any entrepreneur makes is they take too much money too soon. Whether you're a .com company, whether you're a brewer, a distiller, what happens when you take too much money too soon is you lose your ability to pivot and change. So I would try to do as lean of a launch as possible. You know, get your facility registered. Even, you know, in Oregon, you could, if you have a detached garage, you can set up your brewing equipment there and file your TTB paperwork, and you don't even have to pay rent for the year. So you can get started and start giving away your beer and perfecting your recipes, so that when you do get to the point that your license comes in, you can hit the ground running and you know what people like. So what I would say is, don't start out saying I need $2 million or $1 million to get started. I would try to start with as little as possible and let actual customers give you their feedback on the beer. So that would be my answer to your first question. In terms of profitability, the best thing that I can tell you is most craft breweries are nonprofits for a few years. It's a big upfront cost, and getting to the point where you can start making. Seth's nodding over here, so. The one piece of data that I can point you to, there's a great article about Lagunitas Brewing, a national brand, very prominent. They make excellent beer. They weren't profitable till their 12th year. Now, they also grew incredibly fast and made huge investments in production capacity and distribution, and they're even building a new plant in the Midwest right now. So, but that would be the answer to that. And your other question was a common mistake. Yeah, too much money too soon. And I think straying from the core, Mark Meckler, my business partner, he talks about the number one thing that restaurant owners do wrong is they make the restaurant too nice. So, you know, their rent is maybe $1,200-1,500 a month, and then the debt on the build-out to make the tables perfect and the lighting correct and all of this stuff ends up making it so that if they have one slow month, and which, you know, in the beer industry right now, January, February, these are the slow times. If you have a slow month, all of a sudden that beautiful Taj Mahal facility that you have could make you out of your loan covenants, and you could lose your brewery. So I would just say start basic, just like beer. Beer has 5 ingredients, right? There's the 4 we normally talk about, and that 5th ingredient is the wisdom of the brewmaster. If you keep it simple, make a cheeseburger, make pizza, outsource to food carts, keep it simple, get the money flowing in, be innovative in your business model, and then grow later. That's what I would say.
Jason from Wood Green Brewing Company out of Sioux Falls. I want to follow up with a couple of different questions. Following up on the Watertown question, you talked about pricing per pint, and I would just want to clarify this. Now, Watertown is a community of 30,000, I'm guessing numbers, 25,000. Sioux Falls metro area, 250,000-ish. I want to clarify, because of location, we're looking at a downtown location, we could price higher because of location, expect that.
Mm-hmm.
Why are people willing to pay that difference between a small town South Dakota brewery and a big town South Dakota brewery?
Because I think in industry terms, you're still both small and local. People want to feel that connection. I mean, they're not buying Miller or Coors or Budweiser. They're buying the story. They're buying the community. They're buying the fact that they could meet you and maybe go on a tour. And so there's a lot of value in that. And this is not just Sam Holloway's opinion. I flew over to Denmark. I was a guest of the Danish government in 2013. They have this study. It's called the Global Local. And they've shown empirically that the more people have access to information far away, the more they spend their money at home. And I think the craft beer movement is absolutely representing that.
Second part of the question, you talked about viability for population base, and you talked about Portland being a relatively small town. You can't give me any solid numbers because I haven't given you the time to research. But if we're looking at a Sioux Falls metro area of 250,000, what are we looking at for potential brew pubs in the area? What would you guess for a number that population would support?
I guess a pretty high number. Let's take a look at coffee shops. You know, there's a Starbucks on every corner in a lot of major cities, and usually there's a local coffee shop just down the street. And so again, you know, those coffee shops aren't the real pinch point comes in distribution. So, you know, if Portland has 68 breweries and 1 million people, maybe Sioux Falls, you said 250,000? Maybe they could support half, 30, right? The real pinch, I think, is going to come at about 2,000 barrels of production when folks start putting beer into packages and start getting into grocery stores and start taking on debt again to scale up to meet that distribution, maybe multi-state distribution. That's the real pinch point. But in terms of brew pubs selling over the counter and maybe doing a little self-distribution if that becomes legal here, I think it's a very high number. I wouldn't be that concerned about it because it really is a rising sea raises all ships. The more people in Sioux Falls that love craft beer and learn that what beer can taste like and how innovative you and your brewers are and how innovative everybody else is, the better it really is. I mean, in Portland, we had our 68th brewery open up about 3 weeks ago. Earlier this year, we had a Chinese food brew pub open up, you know, and they make incredible Chinese food, pairing it with American craft ale. So, I mean, the sky's really the limit, I think, as long as you stay small. Yeah.
Chris Borns, Watertown Brewing Company. I apologize if you touched on this because I missed the end of one of your answers, but how, like Todd said, we're starting a 5-barrel brew pub, and you know the communities in South Dakota are pretty spread out. How do you feel about limited distribution as a marketing tool?
Well, I think any time you can get your beer in front of more people, it's fantastic. Especially, you know, there might be an opportunity to collaborate with other brewers. You know, maybe you get 6 breweries together in South Dakota and they form a legal distribution company and they start driving beer around and sharing it amongst each other. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of different ideas that you can do, you know, that don't cost a lot of money.
How hard is that to start a distribution company? Because that sounds like a great idea. I think.
Do we have any distributors in the room that can answer this better than I can?
Second row distribution right here.
That
just might be our name.
You know, my flippant answer is a Sprinter van and you know a gas card. You know, the truth is to really, and that's distributing kegs, right? That's you doing it, going to that pub, knowing the person making the beer, them being able to tell your story well. You know, the marketing and advertising support that a professional distributor gets can't be overlooked. So, you know, I don't want to short sell our distributors that might be listening. They do a fantastic job. But, you know, if you're getting started and if there really isn't a infrastructure built up, maybe it's time to collaborate. Just like we do on Collaboration Brews, maybe you collaborate on business too.
One of the last questions we always ask when we do chat with the brewers, and you've kind of spent the last hour talking about this, but I always have to ask, if you have to summarize and give us just 30 seconds of words of advice, what are the words of advice that every brewer or potential brewer must hear before they get out onto this project?
Remember why you started and stick to it. If you started to make great beer because you wanted to employ yourself and maybe your kids or your spouse and you wanted to do something for your community, stick to that. If you're wildly successful and you distribute to 10 states, your story should still be about why you got started. Simon Sinek has a great TED Talk, The Power of Why. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So the core of getting into any business should be, why am I doing this? And then communicate that aggressively and truthfully to anybody that will listen, and I think you'll be okay.
Well, I'd like to thank Sam for coming out for Chat with the Brewer Live on our special edition. There was no finite time period on this, but I've ran out of beer, so I think I think it's about time. I think it's about time. For those of you online, thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions. We appreciate it. For those of you here in the pub, Sam probably be around for. What are you doing the Friday night? You want to hang out for a little while?
I'm thirsty.
All right, we're going to hang out for a little while. Sam's going to be here. Thanks for watching Chat with the Brewer. Next Monday, we've got another special guest, and check out the schedule online. Until then, we'll see you guys down at the pub. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, Sam.